When I was a kid, my mom took me for a photoshoot. Then a month later I was on a pamphlet that said millions of children don't have homes. Adopt one today. This takes place many years ago when foreigners were a rare sight in Japan. I'm a big, friendly looking white guy, and I was asked to do some photos of a couple on a date. So I go around to some scenic locals with a beautiful Japanese woman, the photographer, and his assistants. Fun day. Took tons of romantic photos. And that was the end of it. Until a month or two later when my date and I showed up on posters all over the subway as part of an AIDS awareness campaign. Because you can catch that from foreigners, you know. Needless to say, my friends and coworkers thought it was hilarious. And amazingly, it didn't have any noticeable impact on my dating life. Looking back, my only regret is that I didn't steal one of the posters. I got used as a person with intellectual disabilities. I also did not know my photo was going to be used for anything. When I was a senior in high school, I was chosen to do a stock photo shoot for a big health company. They didn't tell me what they were going to use my pictures for. I was just excited to get free clothes and a tiny bit of cash. The way I found out how they used my photo was when I went to the gynecologist about a year later and saw my picture on the wall. I was the face of teenage pregnancy counseling. Edit. I was definitely not pregnant. I actually think I was still a virgin when the photo shoot happened. My whole family modeled back in the 80s. Somehow my dad ended up in a brochure for some born-again church that said he was a sinner and adulterer until he found Jesus. So I liked to work as an extra in commercials and stock photography. I knew a shoot I was doing was for an expensive large tech company, but they didn't tell me what it was for. A few weeks later, my friends who work at said tech company told me they saw my photo in those mandatory sexual harassment training courses online. So yeah, probably that. Edit. Adding proof in a sec. When I got married, we signed the line that allowed the photographer to sell the photos for commercial purposes. Not thinking much of it. Unexpectedly unhealthy marriage lasted a long 3 months. Story for another post. And about 4 months after the split, a pic of us showed up on the front page of a prominent local magazine. This led to several people at work leaving, bringing it to my attention. Slightly embarrassing and mortifying at the time, but still found the humor in it. I had a very small modeling career in middle and high school. My first real photo shoot was for stock photos. The deal was around $100 and I signed the rights to the photos over to the photographer, but was able to add the photos to my portfolio. When I got the photos, I hated them. I was super nervous and looked uncomfortable in most of them. Needless to say, I was never called back to that photographer. At the end of high school, I had to decide if I was going to pursue modeling or go to college for teaching. I chose to be a teacher. Fast forward to 8 years later, one of my coworkers mentioned that the picture on the loading screen of the grading program looked like me. I never needed to use the program, being the special education co-teacher. Well, we pulled up the grad book and there it was. One of the awful stock photos I took. The photo was their logo and loading screen for several years. That company program is used by school districts in over 70 countries. All of my surrounding counties also use it. I still find it funny that being a teacher is probably the only way I would have found out about it. Sorry for the long post, but that is my weird story about my claim to stock photo fame. Funny side story. My husband works at the same school and for 3 years of entering grades he did not notice that picture was me. When we finally showed him, he said, "Oh, I did think you looked a lot alike." I saw my neighbor in a fetish magazine that featured women pouring relish all over their genitals. I had an evil-looking mustache and my photos were available for use. I ended up as the main photo on one article about spotting a mansplainer. I also ended up on Macaulay Culkin's blog as a long-lost Mario brother. I'm usually late to these. 20 years ago, a friend who had just completed art school asked me to be in some stock images for his portfolio. I was offered a burger and a beer for my time. They were random pedestrian walking down the sidewalk shots. A few of them turned out pretty cool. Later, a local artist bought the rights to one of the better ones. That artist then painted the photo in super realism style and auctioned said painting for around $30K. So now a painting of me walking down a city street, from a stock photo, is hanging in a privately held corporate art collection. Since that time the artist recently passed away, and I've only ever seen a bad photo of the nearly finished painting, never the final piece. For context, my ex and I were an interracial couple, Asian white, and both born in the US. We were used in some passport style and portrait photo studios in Vietnam. We did some other photos, one which included us opening a car trunk near a beachside town, pretending to be on vacation. One day a friend sent us screenshots from an Asian female Western male dating website with our photos on the page. Below each photo were our testimonials, written in Vietnamese with something along the lines of, "What a life. We're a real Cinderella story come true. She used to be a simple country girl and now she's about to get a green card to live a happy and fulfilling life in the US. Thanks." Dating site. Wasn't quite a stock photo, but back in the mid-90s I did a TV advertisement for our national telco company where they also did a series of photo shoots where me and my flatmate, both straight males, posed separately with the latest phones at the time trying to look cool. Fast forward 4 months and we're both on a trip in a really backwards town in the middle of nowhere for an outdoor rave. While walking around town the locals were behaving really weird to us and doing double takes. Some people were quite aggressive, for no reason we could identify. We had to make a call to a friend on a payphone and as we were looking for his number in the phone book we noticed our faces and pictures we were both plastered throughout it. This didn't really explain the weird looks. Who looks in a phone book? But we just assumed that was it. At the end of our trip we took a taxi to the local airport and the driver who'd previously been really friendly, started acting strange and was looking at us and then out his window and back, and was suddenly keen to get us out of his car. After being ejected from the taxi we notice a massive 2-story poster out in front of the terminal entrance with my flatmate and I wearing super tight quasi-cowboy outfits holding hands as a gay couple talking on some sparkly phones: 3TL. Doctor advertising agency put a huge public billboard up in a backwards and homophobic small town with my straight flatmate and I on it, but photoshopped to look like a gay cowboy couple. Edit. I looked fabulous. Have a friend who had both legs amputated at birth. From the UK. He's lived a fine life and plays some wheelchair basketball. He found an advert of himself which described him as a poor boy who recently, he was 18, lost his legs and need thought and prayers from a religious American Facebook group. Thousands of thought and prayers were sent thankfully. This will never get seen due to the number of comments already here but I want to share anyway. Not exactly a stock photo but a picture that made it into the local newspaper. When I was about 17, I was in the library working on something on the computer when a guy came up to me and said he was writing an article about the library, and could he take a picture of me on the computer for the newspaper. I'd seen him talking to the staff who were excitedly telling him about the library and its services so I knew he was legit. So I said sure. The very next day, my photo is on the front page of the newspaper taking up the top third of the page, with the headline "Local Library Infested with Drug Users and Pedophiles." They had a picture of me on the computer, with face fully in view, for an article about how pedos were using the library computers to look at child porn.